try this. I'll technology it up tonight, and thought we'd let everybody have a chance to see some pictures tonight. You're special. The first two groups, I couldn't figure out how to get this together. So tonight's your chance. So I just learned how to do PowerPoint, and does it take very long to do 544 slides? Oh well, we'll see. So there's, can you hear okay, or? Closer? How? Yeah, that's going to be better. Okay. Okay, and wave and remind me, because I almost remember sometimes. Okay. All righty, so we're going to give this a try tonight. I wanted to first go back. First of all, thank everybody for coming. It means a great deal that you're here, and we just appreciate you coming. For those of you who haven't had enough of a chance to look around in the other building, it will be open as long as till the last person leaves. So stay as long as you want. We'll also be open tomorrow. We have Dave's Delicious Barbecue from 11 to 3. You want to come back and bring a friend? There'll be enough barbecue for both of you. And we also, this hasn't been announced yet, but we are going to leave this display up for on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and there's a shower coming up on Saturday. We want to get everything out of the way for. So Thursday morning, we'll be signing up volunteers to come. We'll have a busy morning, but it'll be good. We have a couple other people coming. I think we'll get it taken down and have a nice shower on Sunday. That's what we hope. So nothing lasts forever, does it? You just have to put it up and enjoy it while it's here and then go from there. So that's kind of what we're thinking. I wanted to go back. This probably belonged to one of the other presentations, and I didn't have a chance to get this in the slides. When I was looking through all the materials from all these years, I came across this little flyer. Some of you can see it, some may not. I'll leave it up here. It was the brochure we got when we went up to the top of the World Trade Center. One of our trips to New York, we got to go up there and see that, and I remember standing at the base of that building at the outside and just looking straight up and how incredibly big it is. And just out of curiosity, how many of you have been to the World Trade Center before? Just wondering. The old one. Yeah, the old one, yeah. It was an incredible whole complex, really. So when I was looking through this, and it shows pictures of people dining, having a wonderful time, pictures of people in the observatory looking out over New York City, shows people in apartments, people with their businesses. There's a whole map of all the different businesses in it, and there's some beautiful photos, of course, of it. And as I looked at it, I really grieved again for all the people that were just having a day like we had, that beautiful day, an extraordinary outing in New York City, and up there, and all of a sudden, we all know the chaos that ensued. And I wondered, at our table, someone brought up the subject of ants. You know who you are. I'm not going to make you stand up, but they were talking about ants getting into hummingbird feeders, and we sort of marveled at the table. They figured out they could put a little water dam or something to keep the ants from getting to the, what's it called? So I just thought it was interesting. They were studying, wondering how would the ants cope with the fact that now there's water in the way between them and the hummingbird food. And they were studying this incredible species. You know, I mean, they're so tiny to have such big brains in a way, to be able to try to compensate. They said some of them actually jumped for the food. They figured out ways around the problem, and they work together as a community, don't they? I wondered, what if somebody came to Earth and studied people? Could we be as smart as ants? figure out ways to work together to solve problems instead of fight with each other, you know. That's, if I could pray for one thing, I think I would pray that somehow people could change so we would work as a community and love each other, value all the gifts that we have to give each other and to share. I wish we could do that across every barrier. Now I'm going to start preaching. Okay. So I just wanted to share that with you. There you go. Now, and the thing is, what I want to show you is actually not too far removed from that thought. This first slide is Heidi John right here, and she and her kids worked together with us. We were all friends back in Pleasant Hill days, and Heidi, for it was years, would sit with Ben every weekday from 10 until noon, so Shelly could work on her artwork. And that was during all those years, the first 2 years, that there was not a single thing accepted. It was all rejection, 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 and then she'd work and paint, send it off, and rejection, rejection, rejection. And Heidi was I remember, such a positive person. I don't know if she'll see this or not, but they moved eventually out of town, and I'm afraid we lost track of them, but I still remember her and Kent, and how our families became friends and worked together. And I came across this and just wanted to share that no one does anything unless they have good friends who support them and help them somehow. So I'm grateful all along the way, and wish I could tell Heidi thanks right now, but you can't, and all the people that have been there for us in one way or another. So we had a chance to go to Hong Kong. I think that picture is in the Hong Kong airport. The way it happened was, last time I talked about a man named Bob Nathan, and Bob Nathan was a consultant when we met him, but before that he'd been the executive vice president of UNESCO. And he got to that position because he discovered Sam Butcher, which some of you know made Precious Moments, the biggest collectible figurine line ever. And so Bob really believed in Sam Butcher, and is the one that really helped vault Sam Butcher into fame, and so Bob was the one behind the scenes really helping make all that happen. Eventually, Bob decided to not retire exactly, but shift and become a consultant, and it was around that time that we met him in New York, and he wanted us to come to his house. We went to his house and met with him, and he had all sorts of connections all around the world, actually, from his work. And so he didn't have a company. He wasn't trying to make anything himself. He just knew people who needed somebody, and he knew lots of the players, and he could put them together and solve problems for different ones. So I talked in the last video about how he's the one that knew the people that got the license for the Grinch project when they were able to buy the license for all the mass market merchandise that would be introduced into mass market stores when the Grinch movie was released, but they needed an artist. And they talked to Bob. Bob knew Shelly, and Shelly ended up being that artist. And so that's how she got to do that. So, and then this is another Bob story here. So Bob knew a man named John Shin. John Shin was a very international type person. I don't think I can with complete accuracy tell you all of his past, but I know from what I remember, he was born like in the Philippines, educated in Canada, lived in Hong Kong, and owned factories in China. You may wonder, how did he own something in China? That's a communist country, right? So around that time, China was starting to develop free enterprise zones, or places where people could own their own business and run it. And those were, and I can't go into a long lecture about that. I don't know that much about it. I just know that those were strategically located in certain areas. So Hong Kong being a place that, as you may know, China wants to essentially own, probably, and control. Right across the water was one of the free enterprise zones, because there were people like John Shin in Hong Kong, business people who exported things to the United States and other parts of the world. And they needed factories where they could work with people to make the products they wanted to make. And of course, what they needed was very cheap labor, which they could find in China. And so just it's probably about a 30-minute or so boat ride across the water from Hong Kong to China, in one of those little speedboat things that goes zipping across there. John Shin wanted to have, he wanted to hire 3 American artists. And what he wanted was artists that understood American culture. A reason for that is that Chinese artists, though sometimes they could copy or imitate American artists, they didn't really always understand our culture any more than we would understand theirs, of course. So I think I've told this story before, but Shelly designed a nativity set once. And it was, of course, a drawing, and it was sent overseas so that a sculptor could take the drawing and turn it into a 3-dimensional product. So when the sculpture, the prototype, came back for Shelly to review and make comments about, she had put a halo on baby Jesus, a yellow halo. And when it came back from China, baby Jesus was wearing a straw hat. But if you don't, so you can understand why John Shin wanted American artists to design things that they thought other Americans would enjoy. So Bob Nathan knew of 3 different, lots of artists, but the 3 he ended up recommending were Shelly and 2 others, Ellen Kamitz, and then another artist who's on here. And to be honest, we just knew him during that trip, and I've been racking my brain for what his name was after this whole trip. I can't remember. So we'll see him here in a second. So there we are. If you've ever flown to China or Hong Kong, it's a long way. You just get on that plane, and after 8 hours or so, you think, okay, that's the end of the day. We should be there, and you still have another, you're maybe only halfway there. It's that that plane just keeps going and going and going. It's really something. Through lots of time zones. So we had been traveling on one way or another for, I think, 20 hours. When we finally arrived, let's see here. Let's see if I can advance this or not. Technology is almost a good thing. Here we go. Oops. Gary Live Save, you know how to do this? Okay, here we go. So one of the people that we met is this man. I can't pronounce his name, but he knew some English. And one of the things I didn't realize or fully appreciate before we went to China was that there's an old saying that 2/3 of the world has never been to China, and the rest live there. Yeah. And that's not far off. I mean, China is a big part of the human race. And we often think of Chinese people as being sort of a monolithic group. But what I discovered when we were there is that there are many Chinese people. There's lots of different languages, and they often have trouble even understanding each other. So I remember him trying at a couple different points. He was sort of our translator with us, and I remember times when he would turn to us and say, I can't understand what they're saying, even though they were both Chinese. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, And one of my goals, I guess, in telling you more about this trip is hopefully, we hear a lot about China these days in the news, but I would like to just put a few faces on who are the Chinese people and what are they like, and they're not all the same. They don't even all understand each other's language. And so this was one of his very friendly, very helpful person. That's Ellen Kamitz. And Shelly, of course. And we were, at that point, just getting ready to go shopping. This actually happened later in the trip, not early, but one of the interesting characteristics I read about and then we experienced from John Shen is that they are often flashy with their money. And in America, we tend to want to be confidential and hide our money, but for them, it's actually a compliment if they tell you how much money they spent on the meal. He would say, he would serve us a big fish that, at a restaurant, John Shin, and then of course they even serve it. So they come to your table and he'll bring the fish and he'll serve you some and serve you. Doesn't ask if you want any fish. He just figures out, how much each person should have of this big fish and puts it out on your plate. And then if you eat all of it, he's liable to stand up and put some more on there. And not only that, but he would tell us how much money he spent on the fish, which is unusual for us. But for them, it's like saying, you are so important. I spent $30 on this fish, and you are such an important guest. We spent another $50 on this duck. And so it was just interesting how that went. So anyway, one of the things he did is, at one point, he thought we might like to all go shopping. And so he sent the translator with us, and that was a quick picture of those two. They seemed happy to go shopping. And especially because John Shen gave each of them a whole wad of money. I don't know how much it was. It was all Chinese money, basically, but he handed it all out, a big wad, so they could go shopping. And we all had some fun. There's the street in Hong Kong. I didn't get any pictures of, actually I got lots of pictures of things, but one of the things I couldn't find is the big batch of pictures I took. So this is just a few pictures I found that Ellen sent us and a couple other people. So I don't know where all of them went, but I'm sure I took pictures that are not in these of their scaffolding. They use bamboo scaffolding. So it could be a 60-story building, modern building, slabs of granite on it, and the scaffolding on the outside is bamboo lashed together, and people just climbing all over that. It's just like ants, all over it. So really quite interesting. But it was a very modern city, a lot like New York, flashing lights. You'd see people going down the road. I saw a man, and I couldn't believe this. There's a man riding a bicycle, and he had a pool table somehow balanced in front of it. I have no idea how he did it. But there's just all kinds of things you'd see. Just like if you go to New York City, there's all sorts of astonishing sights, and Hong Kong was no different. Very modern, progressive city. So one of the places that we stopped, this lady had her little sidewalk business, beads and necklaces. So they kind of expected you to barter a little bit, and so, although we didn't really know the language and couldn't, so our host got the best prices for us he could. Let's see, I'm looking here. Okay, now there's only 400 slides left. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. There's only 20 altogether, Gary. We'll get you. Okay. Okay. So there's our translator and Ellen, and the street behind. And okay. So now getting down to business. When we first got there, we'd been traveling 20 hours, and John Shen wanted to have our first meeting. And we went to the hotel and got rid of our luggage, and then he was ready to meet. And so we started talking, and he explained that over the next about 8 days or so, he wanted us to go with him on trips into China to see the factories, and he wanted us to go all through his facility. So in Hong Kong, his facility, this is inside of it. You can see just floor to ceiling, it's hard to see because it's out of focus, but there would be just lines of Santa Clauses, for example. There'd be 2 or 3 floors of just Christmas. And this is a huge, like a block wide building, very big place. And then there'd be a whole floor just of Halloween. So it was not for individuals to come to. So Walmart, Kmart, all those places would go there. He was one of the largest importers of gift items to our country. So people like our big chain stores went to see John Shin, and then they would go through there and they'd say, well, I think we'll do these 3 Santas and these 3 pumpkins, and they'd figure out, what they wanted to order, and they would negotiate a price, and then he would go negotiate a price with the factories to see if, how much he could offer them for, and before they would be then shipped to the United States. So there we were. Now, it was interesting because Bob Nathan thought this would be a good opportunity for Shelly, partly because he was trying to put together solve a problem like a consultant would and put together a deal. The thing was that the agent didn't like that at all. The agent wanted Shelly to just work with people that would make sure they always put her name on everything. And John Shin was like, I just want you to do things and we won't put your name on it, but I'll still pay you a percentage for it or whatever, and it's just going to go out there in the market. And we sell lots of things to lots of companies, and he was saying you could make a lot of money, it's just not going to have your name on it. The agent wanted her name on everything. So they kind of went back and forth about it a while, and finally we needed money. And basically, and it's ended up that the agent reluctantly let us go ahead and do this, try to work with him for, ended up being about 1.5 years. So that is in the harbor, see the boats. So we're getting ready to take a boat ride. After we met with him and all that, then he wanted to take us across to China. So in China, if you go across, at least the way we were going, we had to be back out of there by 11 o'clock every night. And it was, I have to say, intimidating to go into China because there's all these big signs with big letters, and we couldn't understand any of it. And there were men with, machine guns standing there, and it was like, they really meant business. And when it was time to get there or get out, you needed to do what you're supposed to do. They weren't just telling jokes, And so anyway, we had to take this boat across the river. Michael, his name was Michael. I'm seeing now. So Michael and I are standing there on this boat, headed across the water, and that's Hong Kong in the background. When we got to China, we had a drive each time, and the thing was, I would sometimes ask where we are, and they would say Gongjiang, and I would know as much as you know now. It's just like, well, we're another 30 minutes and we'll be there, and I didn't understand where we were. We just drove around until we stopped, and then that's where we were. And I've kind of wondered what it would be like sometimes, especially with that in mind, for people that come to our country that don't understand our language, but they're fleeing something, and then, it's bewildering to be in a place where if you get a map and you want to figure out how do I get from here to there, you can't read the language on the map. To even figure out where you are, much less what roads to take to get there. If you look at a street sign, it doesn't mean any more to you than Chinese characters. It was an interesting experience. They were comfortable with it. A couple of our hosts were sleeping in the back seat of the car while we were going. And then here's some more people we met at one of the factories. They were almost all young people, not child labor. I heard about child labor. These weren't tourist places. They took us in where they were doing business, and these were young adults, and we found out that most of them were people that were trying to save money so they could get married and go on with the rest of their life. They were college age about, and so anyway, this was 4 of the people that worked there, and I was interested to see what does a factory in China look like. So you'll get to see one here. There's one. picture. There's several. I pictured a factory as having automation. And I was thinking, if you're going to make the kinds of things that you all buy, you know, and we buy, if you go to any of our stores and you buy a resin angel to give someone as a gift, who painted the angel? How did it get formed? And so this factory, I thought, well, there might be some machine stamping out the angels or something. Well, the machine is all Chinese men doing this, the first part. Once an angel is carved, so they have a carving, they would pour rubber around it, like a rubber mold, and then they would pour that, and it would be poured inside of a chunk of plaster, big pieces of plaster Paris. And there might end up being 3 or 4 of the same piece of rubber that came off of the same sculpture, all in one chunk of plaster. So they put that rubber in there, pour in the resin, all done by hand. Men doing it. It's heavy work, all the plaster. And after it dried, they'd break apart the plaster blocks and then pull out the pieces of rubber. And because it's rubber, an item could have undercuts in it, and the rubber could stretch over. Does that make sense? So you could have a Christmas tree with a trunk here, and the rubber would peel out from under the branches of the tree, and so they would peel all this rubber off of the piece, and then put it back and pour it again. In the same way, make 100,000 trees, angels, whatever it is that we buy, you know, out of resin that we want to buy for a relatively cheap amount, and from people that are earning very, very little compared to our minimum wage. And so these are some of those people, again, working. And after the men do this, there was a whole nother area of the factory where there were men that had little grinders and grind off the high spots, one at a time, 100,000 of them. And they put them in these blue containers you'll see in a minute, like milk cartons. And then they would go to these tables that you'll see in just a second, where the women did all the painting. And I thought, well, they'd at least have some sort of organized painting thing, but anything you could imagine that would hold liquid, a Pepsi can with the top cut off of it is, that held blue paint. I saw people, you know, painting with a paper cup, and they had green or whatever, but whatever color you had, that's what you did all day long. If you had black, you would paint the 10 eyelashes on 100,000 figurines, just sitting there at these tables. And so there they are. You see all the containers in the background, so they would fit, you know, maybe 20 or so figurines in the bottom of each container and stack it up, and they would be passed one at a time all around the table. They'd put on the pupils, the eyes, the eyelashes, the hair, you know, the color, all the way around until that station was done. And there were lots of stations. This was a drying area with the fans on the pieces. Now here, you can kind of get an idea. Just as far as you can see, there's room after room, tables of people just passing those all around. That's what I was interested about the ants. So many working together for a common purpose. And one of the things I learned while we were there was that the workers lived at the factories, and the only time they got off was Chinese New Year. And if you're familiar with China, it's about a month-long big holiday, and during that time, all these workers would go back home, and everybody celebrated, and hardly any work gets done. You know, in China during that time, they'd all go celebrate. But the rest of the time, we saw the dorm rooms they lived in. They're just a little cubicle. There might be a dresser and a couple of sandals on the floor and a bed. And they didn't spend a lot of time in there. No TV, anything like that. They would work in the factory, and they had a lot of pride in working together to get the 100,000 pieces done of this order or that order. John Shen came along and said, Walmart needs 100,000 by Tuesday of next week, and it's got to be shipped, and whatever it is, then they work hard together, even if they have to stay till late at night. They kept working. And I just thought it was really interesting, that mentality, and they all felt good if together they could succeed and get something done on time. And I thought that was an interesting mindset, that because we, of course, sometimes approach things in a different direction, but individually and that kind of thing. But they were really looking at it as, what does our company do? How do we make our company succeed? And so that's a whole bunch of them working hard. They rarely talked. You could hardly hear anybody talking in those big rooms. You think they'd all be chatting. One of these, I don't remember if it's this slide or another one, there's somebody, a woman had her shoes kicked off and under the table and bare feet under there. Thought of Sherry Renner. Sherry. But just someone who's just had a little bit of free spirit to her, and enjoying life, but she was still working hard, getting everything done. There's another picture of everybody working in a factory, and part of it. Look at all those boxes. How would you feel if you woke up in the morning and looked at a wall of boxes and thought, I've got to put eyelashes on all those? There they are again. That's Michael in the background and the guy walking along there. So this is near the end of this part, but while we were in China, we'd sometimes stop at different restaurants, and there were lots of interesting food experiences in China. One in Hong Kong too. In the hotel, the very first morning, I tried to order from the menu. They could sort of speak English, but anyway, I wanted orange juice. So here came, it must have been like a shot glass of orange juice, just teeny tiny glass. And so I drank it, but I was like, I wanted more. So the next day, I said, I'd like orange juice, but can I get 2? And they brought 2 big, they were just like quarts of orange juice, 2 of them. So I remember the next day, I said, okay, if they're little, I want 2. If they're big, I just want 1. And they brought me 2 little ones and 2 big ones. And it's like, okay, and I remember another time, this was in actual China, we went to an area that I don't think they saw many Americans at all, because when the 4 of us Americans went in, I was the only spouse that took up the offer to go as a spouse, but we went in, and everybody was staring at us in that restaurant, and there was obviously Chinese music playing, and we sat down about in the middle of the room, and our interpreter was with us, and John Shen was with us, and I'm sure it was the owner, came over, and he came right up to our table, and everyone just looking, these Americans in there, and he said something to John Shen. John Shen said something back, and he was like, oh, they're from America, so you could sort of see, and then he goes like this, and he disappeared, and all of a sudden the Chinese music stopped, and the Lone Ranger started playing. and everybody in the whole restaurant, we all laughed together. It was just really something. The Americans were laughing, the Chinese were laughing, we were all laughing together. Anyway, it was just really, that was the best rendition I could do. But anyway, so there was another time that I remember being in a restaurant, and we got some soup, and it was cloudy, I couldn't see what was in the bottom of it, and I stuck a spoon in there and lifted it up. It's been a while since you've eaten, right? Okay. It was a pig's ear with the hair still on it. And I thought, well, maybe that's what they eat and I should try it. And it was just as tough and chewy and hairy as you'd think it was. I didn't eat it. But I remember reading that one of the reasons that there's such a variety of food in China is partly because of all the many different cultures there are to begin with. It's not a monolithic people, but also because in times of poverty, people will try to use every single part of an animal to eat it. So I remember John Shen showing us how to, because we were done when the fish was done, but he had the head. He wanted to teach us how all that you could do with the head of a fish to still get more food from it. I'm not going to go further, but he demonstrated some of that for us. And anyway, it also said that part of it came from creativity, that part of the idea was when you had guests, that you should try to come up with something to honor them, and sometimes innovation and creativity was a way to do that. Like here, I'm going to combine orange and pheasant, or I'm going to combine this kind of fish with this kind of lamb and this kind of cranberry sauce. And they always experimenting and trying something new. And so anyway, I think there's sort of twin reasons why there's so many different kinds of so-called Chinese food. But anyway, in this case, because again, the idea, this was in a factory in China, we happened to get there on the day, at lunchtime, they celebrated the birthdays of the month. So there was not any individuals named. They just celebrate once a month. Everyone has a birthday in that month, but no one steps forward. It's a group thing. They all celebrate, but no, it's not individualistic like happy birthday, dear Jeff, or something. It's just happy birthday to all those who have a birthday in our midst. And anyway, they brought out cake. Now we had, by this time, had all gotten used to chopsticks. And I'm going to do a close-up for you. I'm going to try anyway. Oops. Well, the very last slide is a close-up. I'll skip it. You look close right there. See the plastic fork? I remember being there and looking around, and I said, all the Chinese people were eating their cake with plastic forks. And here we Americans were with chopsticks trying to figure out if you're trying to eat cake with chopsticks. And so I kind of said something to our translator. I said, isn't it funny that here we Americans are trying to eat the cake with chopsticks, and all the Chinese people are eating it with fork? And he goes, oh no, eat cake with fork, much easier. And so anyway, so we had lots of laughs. It ended up that Shelly did gobs of designs over the years. None of those have her name on them. But on the other hand, they did, at least for a while, get an American flair. She was the last of the three artists to keep working for Mr. Shen, John Shen. Michael stopped first, then later Ellen, and then finally Shelly. So it was a relationship that lasted about a year and a half, and after a period of time, he was ready to move on, just like in any artistic relationship if you're freelance. And so it was a very interesting chapter, and mostly I'm thankful for the experience to, just for a while, to get to know someone literally on the other side of the world, as people and humans, that we could laugh together, and we could all be more like the ants, you know. And so something to pray for, something to think about. All those people, I suppose, are still over there, and they can't control what their government does, and much more than we can ours, I suppose, but they're still eating cake with forks in China. So thank you, everybody. Bless you.